Hi, my name is Dwayne Gathers, and welcome to CivitasLA, featuring diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. These bi-weekly conversations allow us to hear from, learn from, and be inspired by a new generation of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward and making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Now more than ever, our goal is really simple, and that's to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement. And that right there, friends, is really the topic of today's conversation and today's guest with us. Appearing in Public Administration Review, Professor Evan Berman wrote a piece entitled Dealing with Cynical Citizens, stating widespread concern exists about public cynicism toward government, and that manifestations of public cynicism include pervasive belief that government policies and public officials are corrupt, inept, or out to take advantage of citizens. Cynicism is defined as low trust, specifically a pervasive disbelief in the possibility of good in dealing with others. So as a podcast that's focused on spurring civic knowledge and engagement, we are absolutely delighted to be joined in studio by someone who's at a front row seat in engaging with diverse communities on myriad issues and has worked to overcome this sense of cynicism to promote overall community good. So on this 50th episode of CivitasLA, we are delighted to be joined in studio by Los Angeles City Council President Pro Tem Mitch O'Farrell, who represents over 250,000 residents across the 13th District of the City Council of Los Angeles, one of the most diverse districts in our region. So, Councilmember O'Farrell, welcome to CivitasLA.
Dwayne, it is great to be here in the 13th District in this lovely studio, and I'm so happy to be with you today.
Well, we are recording here on the beautiful campus of Emerson College in the heart of Hollywood, so this is very appropriate. Councilmember, we always like to begin by having the guest offer a self-introduction.
Thank you very much. Mitch O'Farrell, vested in the 13th District since January of 1982 when I arrived here from Oklahoma City, and I have always built community around where I lived, and not until after the age of 40 did I get involved in public service when I was hired by my predecessor, who is now the mayor, Eric Garcetti, where I worked for 10 years. I come from a long line of Native American leaders on the Wyandot side of my family. My grandfather was chief of the tribe, federally recognized tribe on my mother's side that I'm a member of. And I was sworn in to my position back in 2013 at the Los Angeles River by Chief Billy Friend. So I've been in office now for a little over 8 years. On my father's side, I come from a union household. We are a union family. He was a teamster, a truck driver. I grew up understanding what struggle is. By the time I was in 5th grade, I went to 6 different schools. We moved around a lot. We faced eviction and struggle. And then by the time I was in 7th grade, we had lived in 10 different places. And so I think that hardship really prepared me well for public service. And in the spirit of building community wherever I landed in the various places I've lived in the 13th District. And so I'm mission-driven in my approach to public service. I totally understand cynicism, but what I encourage listeners to really think about in terms of politics and politicians and public service is have a healthy dose of skepticism. That's very different from being cynical. I'm not a cynical person. I'm an optimist at the end of the day, but I've always reserved a dose of skepticism myself for things, and I think it's a way of keeping myself in check and staying on track to be the best public servant that I can possibly be. Mm-hmm.
No, we appreciate that, and you mentioned that you became engaged really at 40, or maybe in public life at 40, but where did civic engagement and where did community involvement start for you here in Los Angeles?
Let's see. Back in the 80s, I would volunteer here and there for things that I believed in, oftentimes animal welfare issues. And then in the early 90s, I delivered angel food for Project Angel Food as a volunteer for several years. In my Volkswagen Beetle.
and let me just share that we had Richard Ayub from Project Angel Food on as a guest, so a shout out to the great work of Project Angel Food.
They're phenomenal. Yeah. I love them. I have over a 30-year association with them. I've volunteered since being council member as well, and I love that organization. I also volunteered for 3 years at the Wildlife Way Station in Simi Valley back in the late 90s. And I would volunteer for various political campaigns when there was a candidate that I believed in. So I learned the power of leaning in and supporting elected officials that I believed in their cause. So I've always been a volunteer in my neighborhood. And then that led to just volunteering in my neighborhood. And back in the late 90s, I joined the Glassell Park Improvement Association.
Okay.
I then became its president, and I helped form a neighborhood council in Glassell Park where I live with my partner of almost 30 years. And so I've really cut my teeth on volunteerism before ever beginning in the office of Eric Garcetti back in 2002, always working a professional job, but just volunteering on my free time.
And I know one of the conversations here in our region is about access and accountability, and part of the challenge is that these council districts are really quite large. So for our audience that's not from Los Angeles, since we've got a lot of non-LA listeners, share with us how large these council districts are, and how much of a challenge is that to manage all the issues that come before you.
So Los Angeles is a city of nearly 4 million. Each council district has anywhere between 245 to 255, 60,000 constituents. And what's interesting is before I ever started work with my predecessor's office, I was so familiar with the district from delivering Project Angel Food for those years that I did. I became very familiar with all of the intricate streets in Silver Lake and Echo Park and Glassell Park where I live. Hollywood, I worked in Hollywood. I was a waiter at Theodore's Cafe in 1986, which is at the Roosevelt Hotel.
Okay.
I know the district really well. I've lived in a number of locations within the district. So I came into the office understanding the terrain. And by the time I ran for this seat, I had my arms around the district. And I think that I owe it to my constituents to keep my feet firmly on the ground in the trenches, which is why we do a monthly community event somewhere in the district. We've now done, I think it's 75 of these events where we go door to door and simply offer things to constituents, the services that are available to them. We paint out graffiti, we trim trees, we do a cleanup with volunteers and my staff and my clean team, which I've hired out of Conservation Corps. So feet on the ground, in the trenches, fighting against that cynicism that is pervasive out there. I want to make sure that people believe that government can work for them demonstrably, and I try to put my feet on the ground and walk the walk.
Sure. Well, you mentioned how large these districts can be, and your work as a field deputy, district director, now council member. So not to put you on the spot, I'm not going to ask you what your favorite communities are, but I'm just curious if you could share for our audience, just give us a quick characteristic of some of the diverse neighborhoods in your district. Let's start with Atwater Village.
Diverse is right. Atwater Village is a slice of Mayberry.
Okay.
And it's a very walkable, lovely, incredible community of historic and beautiful homes, a tight-knit neighborhood where people get out and they organize for the good of the district. They have one of the best Halloween events.
Okay.
Probably the best tree lighting ceremony, which I've always been a part of in the city for the holidays. It's just a great community next door to where I live.
Okay. East Hollywood.
East Hollywood is the largest in population of any specific community that I have the honor of representing. It's really coming to its own. It has some of the densest neighborhoods in the entire city of Los Angeles. It has some of the lowest household income census tracts of anywhere in the city. I'm very, very aware of that, which is why we've done a lot of work and outreach and involvement in East Hollywood.
Echo Park.
Echo Park is an incredible community where we've done a lot of work. When I was in the office of my predecessor, I led on the restoration of Echo Park Lake, and it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. We recently housed about 200 people there who were experiencing homelessness, and then closed the park for repairs, reopened it in time for the summer, and it remains a beautiful place for all of the incredible community members who live there.
And it's become quite the hipsterville, too.
It's hipsterville, but it's also, it's a very diverse community. So we continue to do a lot of work and community involvement with the various groups that are there.
Elysian Valley.
Elysian Valley is another very special neighborhood along the Los Angeles River. It's a sliver of a neighborhood of about 6,000 people that a lot of folks don't even know about. It is effectively referred to as Frogtown. Mm-hmm. Big art scene there.
Right.
And another really tight-knit community of people who take pride in where they live. And it has its roots in the Union Pacific Railroad, where a lot of the workers lived 100 years ago.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Glassell Park.
Glassell Park. I've lived there. Yeah, it's like I've lived there since 1992. And it is a community that was split in half with the construction of the 2 freeway back in the 70s.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of civic pride there as well. I cut my teeth on volunteerism. We've done a lot of great work. I did a community center and senior center there when I was on the staff of my predecessor, built a community garden that replaced a really dangerous location that was a former gang headquarters.
And we're going to talk
and that's
about
a whole
that.
story.
Sure,
so it's a great community also.
Historic Filipinotown.
Historic Filipinotown is an incredible place that has a concentration of Filipino Americans that are generational. It has a lot of identifying characteristics. We've uplifted and celebrated Historic Filipinotown since I've been in office, doing streetscapes and cultural enhancements, and we're about to dedicate the Historic Filipinotown Gateway next month.
Interesting. Mid-Wilshire, Koreatown area.
Mid-Wilshire, Koreatown. It's interesting. It's right at the urban core of Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Actually, the whole district is, but Mid-Wilshire, Koreatown is really a happening place with incredible diversity in groups, not just the Korean American population, but also Bangladesh and Latino, and it's a real melting pot of individuals, and we work very closely with those groups as well.
Excellent. Rampart Village.
Rampart Village, again, at the urban core, neighboring Westlake, neighboring East Hollywood, neighboring Echo Park, really coming into its own as an identity. And part of it was the formation of the neighborhood council there many, many years ago now. So they do great work, and we partner with the groups there all the time.
And then you've got a part of Silver Lake.
Silver Lake, a large part of Silver Lake, half of the reservoir complex, which we are leading in the renovation of the master plan. Silver Lake is just terrific, hilly, diverse. You have the 101 corridor with some of the communities that are impacted by the freeway and all of the challenges that come with that, and then all the way to the hillside areas, which are historic. And it's really the sort of the center of historic LGBT Los Angeles.
Well, certainly last but and not least, but because we are here at Emerson College, located on Sunset Boulevard, I'm not going to ask you your favorite community, but we are here in Hollywood, so share some thoughts on Hollywood.
Love Hollywood. It's where I moved to in 1982, lived in a crowded apartment on Hawthorne at Sycamore.
Oh, wow.
With 7 roommates. I slept on the floor with just a blanket, not even a pillow at first, and I really got to know Hollywood back in the days when there was zero investment in the community, had seen better days. Hollywood has really come into its own. We're doing the Walk of Fame master plan, which is going to be incredible. Hollywood Boulevard is Los Angeles' boulevard. That's it. And so we're uplifting it. It's a place it's historic, of course. It's a tourist destination, but more than anything else, it's a neighborhood of people who are invested in the success of their neighborhood where they live and work. And that is what's driving our design on the Walk of Fame master plan.
Now, that's incredible. So in 2013, you ran and won for a seat on the city council to replace your previous boss. And as a staff leader, you've worked with these groups, you worked on issues over the years. How's your view of the issue or the challenges or the actors change as you've moved up in the ranks? And how does your perspective on these issues change through different lenses?
It's evolved. I'm a huge believer in remaining nimble. I was a professional dancer. I was a competitive gymnast. I have always been on the go. I have many, many interests. And so I can really relate with the younger generation and pay close attention to the way people think, the way they feel, the greater awareness. You know, the summer of 2020, after the George Floyd murder, things have changed. There's a greater awareness of social justice and righting the wrongs of history. Part of that was leadership that I took back in 2017 when we eliminated Columbus Day and replaced it with Indigenous Peoples Day on the city's administrative code. So my leadership on unarmed response to people in crises, and that pilot project is underway in Hollywood. So things change. Basic human desire and nature doesn't change. People want to feel safe. They want to feel listened to. Mm-hmm. They want to know that their neighborhoods are safe and that we make advances on social issues. And I feel like we're right in there with that and are moving along in a great way with many, many partners, nonprofits, mm-hmm. And organizations to deal with that. But lastly, as a city council member, people want to feel that I understand what their needs are, where they live and work, sure. on their street, stoplights, sure. safer crosswalks, pedestrian activated traffic signals, trees, plantings and trimmings. And so I think the nuts and bolts of community where people live is very important and always will be.
Well, certainly in that article that I referenced earlier in Public Administration Review, it noted that cities that foster positive citizen attitudes through a variety of strategies of participation, information, and reputation experience less cynicism. So how do you go about, and how does your staff go about engaging with community on challenging issues? And I want to go back to the issue you referenced earlier, and that was the Glassell Park community garden and how that came about.
We lean in. We don't walk away or look the other way. We lean in, and enough people know me personally, and my staff knows that I'll talk to people at the supermarket. I'll get personal phone calls. We really pay attention to service mm-hmm. and a public service-oriented office. The Glassell Park Community Garden is an amazing story. Mm-hmm. There were 4 homicides traced to this one house that used to stand there, over 100 felonies that were traced to this one location. It was one of the satellite homes of the Avenues gang, the Drew Street clique. And it had been traded to straw man owners over the years. Mm-hmm. So, gosh, it's been about 12 years ago that I worked on, after it had been basically repossessed by the bank, it was Wells Fargo. I worked with Wells Fargo to get them to donate that parcel to the city of Los Angeles, which they did after a 6-month process. Mm-hmm. I had to track them down in Des Moines, Iowa. Right.
And you were you on council at that time, or you were working for the council office?
I was working for the council
mm-hmm.
office
okay.
at that time. So
mm-hmm.
I knew that the community needed healing.
Yeah.
Big time. And so they eventually donated it to the city. It was my project from beginning to end. We did the environmental reviews. We demolished the home that was there, mm-hmm. and we built a community garden. And then we went door to door in the neighborhood. And we administered the plots through the Community Garden Council, great mm-hmm. partners. And it culminated in a shaman's blessing from a Native American tribe where everyone was invited. We stood in a big circle, mm-hmm. held hands, and they did a Native American blessing. Wow. And this community garden prospers to this day. And that was in 2011 when we dedicated it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's amazing. And certainly, I know you've been very involved in your council work with regards to efforts to revitalize the river. And I know one of the conversations that have been taking place have been about connecting and reconnecting communities that have been separated by the river. And you were very involved in the, I think it's the Red Car Bridge project. Speak to that project.
Well, connectivity is something that's so important, and it is a value that was driven home to me by Councilmember Ed Reyes, who mm-hmm. has always been a champion of the LA River, who grew up in the Cypress Park area mm-hmm. adjacent to the river. So I carried on his torch The river is now back into my committee, which I chair, which is the Energy, Environmental Justice, Climate Change, and LA River Committee. And we've done so much work. A lot of the work started when I was still on the staff of my predecessor, but I'm responsible for 4 bridges that have been built across the river, including Redcar, which you mentioned. We dedicated that in January of 2020, I believe, and it was a big celebration. It's an incredible multimodal bridge that connects Atwater Village across the river, which is technically in Silver Lake, but there's a whole freeway system that you have to navigate through. But we're working on that as well through the rebuilding, renovation, and seismic retrofit of the Hyperion Bridge, which is adjacent.
Sure. And these are all pedestrian and bikes, correct?
All of them.
No vehicles.
No vehicles whatsoever. There's a bridge north of there that we helped mitigate some of the issues with that is equestrian focus, the equestrian bridge. But the other bridges we're working on, we funded a bridge that connects the Glendale Riverwalk with North Atwater Village. That isn't under construction yet, but it's fully funded. And then there are so many bridges on the way. We're about to dedicate another bridge in Elysian Valley that I worked on the whole time I worked for Eric and now as council member. And that is complete, but we're just waiting on finishing touches, and we'll be dedicating that next month as well. It's going to be a busy month in the 13th District.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And you touched on your work with regards to Indigenous Peoples Day. And I recall there was a little bit of consternation, shall we say, in other communities about eliminating Columbus Day. So speak to your work around that and your work in engaging particularly the Italian-American community in terms of, moving from Columbus Day to this particular day and how this day is being celebrated and how that's evolved.
So I end up on the city council after a successful first campaign back in 2013. And I was just the neighborhood guy. I was the public servant who knew a lot of the folks across the district who wanted me to run for the seat and be Eric's successor. I get on the city council and I learn that I'm the first city council member in the city's history who is a member of a federally recognized Native American tribe. There have been other indigenous council members, there's no question about it.
Sure.
But as far as a federally recognized tribal member, never before, which I found shocking. So it was a realization for me. And so when I was the host for Native American Heritage Month in November, by the second year, I knew that something had to change. It was absurd to me as a Native American that the city of Los Angeles had in its administrative code the celebration of Columbus Day, which was a paid city holiday in the memory of Christopher Columbus. And so that's so complex, especially considering the tribes in California were so erased because of the Spanish mission system. Columbus himself, a mercenary who did terrible things, committed atrocities to the first peoples he and his men encountered back in 1492 and 3 subsequent voyages, was so abstract to California, it didn't make any sense at minimum here. So I strived to replace the day. And the way we did this is we worked with the Human Relations Commission, and we organized open house roundtables that anyone could come to.
Okay.
And there were members of the Italian-American community, Knights of Columbus, et cetera, who came. And it was a 2-year conversation that we had that culminated in the vote on August 30th of 2017, which was my late mother's birthday, which was symbolic to me personally. And that's where I get my Wyandotte ancestry from. And we made the change. And it's been very successful. The city hall, the city erupted. I've never experienced energy like that before. And it was an amazing day that I will never forget. And now its legacy lives on in new ways, and we're doing more in relation to elevating the Native American community than ever before.
And what are some of the signature celebrations that occur now on that particular day that you're involved in?
So this year, I addressed a school, a class, and talked about my Native American heritage and talked about the reason for the cause and talked about how this wasn't Columbus Day, eliminating Columbus Day and celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day wasn't at the expense of anyone. It was in celebration of the first peoples in this country that we have an obligation to celebrate their sacrifices, their culture. And I think that's something we can all get behind. And it's important to note, too, that Christopher Columbus was adopted by some as, I don't know, someone to look to. But you can't erase the facts of history. It's all there for anyone who wants to look at it. And again, this was done in the open. We had a lot of Italian Americans supporting this. And it's grown. When the city of Los Angeles acted, within weeks, other major cities took action as well. It was kind of stunning. And when we did this in 2017, there were 5 U.S. states that celebrated some form of Indigenous Peoples Day. Now it's 12, 15 states. I think Columbus Day as a national holiday, its days are numbered.
Let's circle back to Hollywood, since we are here in the heart of Hollywood. And we kickstarted this podcast, episode 1, on reimagining LA's Main Street, which is Hollywood Boulevard, and your work and your leadership and your team's leadership in terms of this Heart of Hollywood initiative. And I know part of the conversation was around the extensive community engagement there, because obviously for some, Hollywood's a destination. For many, it's a pass-through, folks who live in the hills. So talk about the community involvement in that process, but also, since we talked about it in episode 1, where are we with that particular project? It's a massive undertaking. So share with us some updates if you can.
Sure. Well, we're entering into the third and final phase of design. So it's not too late to participate and, check out how you can add public comment or, make a comment on it. We've had 65 roundtables so far that everyone is invited to. And you'll be listened to. What we want to hear is your ideas. It's inevitable, it's necessary that the boulevard evolve with us as a city. It's forlorn, it's seen better days, but it's an incredible place. It's an incredible resource. It's something that the city of Los Angeles should rally around. It is our boulevard. All nearly 4 million of us should be very proud and take pride in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's historic. There's nothing else like it in the world. As someone who moved here from Oklahoma as a very, very young man, I don't know, it loomed larger in my life. And I think that's the same story for a lot of people who live here and aren't from here necessarily. So we need to celebrate and improve the boulevard, make it more walkable, bikeable, mass transit oriented, while also not ignoring the fact that people are still going to drive cars, but really giving much more of the space to biking and walking, widening the sidewalks, improving it, street trees, reducing the heat island effect. So it's an environmental project, it's a transit project, it is a placemaking project with Hollywood residents at the center of the decision making. But tourists are going to enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, I know pre-pandemic, LA was touting the fact that we had received upwards of 50+ million visitors. And I know in Hollywood, we say that the Walk of Fame, Hollywood alone, gets about 10+ million visitors annually. So it's a huge impact. What do you think we might see by the time the Olympics rolls around in 2028?
I want the Walk of Fame master plan to be fully implemented by 2028. Okay. And there's no reason it can't be. We're already applying for grants. We already have money to begin with. And we will start seeing some change within a couple of years, within a few short years. It's 1.3 miles on Hollywood Boulevard alone, and then about a quarter of a mile, probably a quarter of a mile on Vine Street between Yucca and Sunset. The entire Walk of Fame needs the attention that a major boulevard should have. And I liken it to the pride that Chicago residents take in Michigan Avenue.
Sure.
Hollywood Boulevard should be our Michigan Avenue, and we need to have pride in it and invest in it. And I think, I'm sure we're going to do it.
Well, I know, as council member, you lead that charge, but are you getting the same sort of engagement from our other council members to make this a city project? And I'm just curious to know as well, might there be any opportunity to access some of the federal infrastructure dollars coming down the pike?
Absolutely, already on it. we are good at looking for funding and accessing funding. I have no doubt about it that we'll be able to do this. And it's really a source of pride for me, but it was also a campaign promise back in 2013. So in 2018, I brought on a director, and the work continues. And we're looking very, very forward to this third phase of design. And Gensler, a local firm, and it was a local Hollywood resident from Gensler who helped lead the conversation. So the community has vested in its success, and I encourage everyone to learn more about it.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate it, Dan Halden, Director of Heart of Hollywood, and Lee Wen from Gensler being episode 1. So they are great civic entrepreneurs. You know, Councilmember, we just talked about the diverse communities that make up not just the city, but your district and your role as a district director and council member. So I'm sure you've attended a lot of rubber chicken dinners and receptions, what have you. So as we wind down, we always like to get a sense of your Los Angeles through our lightning round questions. So this gives our audience a chance to hear some of your favorites. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Share a favorite restaurant or two.
I will share with you Found Oyster. They're on Fountain. Try their lobster sandwich. They were one of the recipients of my small business grants during the pandemic.
Well, I'm allergic, but that's a good recommendation.
Well, but I also love Musso and Frank in Hollywood. I mean, Musso and Frank was I went to Musso and Frank my first week in Hollywood. I had almost no money, so I had a wedge salad and a hot tea. That was 1982, and I remember exactly what I had.
Oh my gosh.
It's all I could afford. And I sat at the counter, but it was such a historic place, and we celebrated its 100th birthday just a few years back.
Excellent. A favorite place to take a sip, whether that's a cocktail or a coffee, where do you go for a sip?
So Genever in historic Filipinotown, which is locally owned by these wonderful young women on Beverly, is a great watering hole. Love Intelligentsia coffee. I love coffee houses that are local. I love Silver Lake coffee. I'm a coffee drinker.
Okay.
And I'm a wine sipper occasionally. I hardly ever imbibe at all, but I definitely like my morning coffee.
Excellent. Favorite place to take a visitor?
Favorite place to take a visitor? Well, I love to take people to the Hollywood Bowl. I mean, in all of Los Angeles, not in the 13th District, but in all of Los Angeles, if you have one day to visit here, go to the Hollywood Bowl. But in the 13th, go to the Walk of Fame. I mean, really, it's like you got to see the Walk of Fame and look at the stars. Go to the Chinese Theater, look at the hand and footprints. It's incredible.
I'm going to stop right there because, I love all of our guests and I love all these favorite places, but you're the first one in 50 who mentioned the Hollywood Bowl, and that is absolutely my favorite place in the world.
Excellent. I swear to you, it's such a special place. It's a magical place with such history.
Well, we've got so many great options, but shout out for the Hollywood Bowl. Share with us a hidden gem, something that very few people might know about.
Our public staircases in Echo Park and Silver Lake. There's one in Glassell Park near my home. Los Angeles has a history with staircases. There's the Music Box Steps, of course, in Silver Lake, which the Music Box was filmed in 1932, Laurel and Hardy. You can even see a streetcar in one of the scenes going down Sunset Boulevard.
Okay.
The staircases are an incredible historic resource, and they're really good for getting your steps in.
And that is a first-time reference, so we'll have to find those. We love open space here in our region, the desert, mountain, beach, etc. Share with us a favorite hike or favorite park.
Echo Park Lake. It's restored, it's safe, it's clean, it's secure, it's well managed, and it will remain so. Also, Elysian Park has some incredible trails. It's a beautiful, beautiful space. The city's oldest large urban park. It's an incredible place.
Outstanding. Councilmember, thank you so much. Thank you very much for being here. As we like to say on CivitasLA, we love to give the guests the final word. Give us any concluding thoughts or any calls to action that you'd like to share with our audience around civic engagement and community, particularly, as we get to enter a municipal election year in Los Angeles next year. Final thoughts.
Yes, I encourage engagement. I encourage healthy skepticism and not cynicism. I discourage an over-reliance on social media. It is a downward spiral for the most part, but you can certainly help get your message out. But the algorithms are set to lead people to their own worst instincts. Realize that and really take social media for what it is. And just get engaged in real community events, helping others, supporting others, getting to know folks without talking past them. Refrain from judgment, refrain from putting lines in the sand, and be respectful and engage in collaboration, even when there's disagreement in the approach. Human nature, we can do amazing things if we just stay optimistic, but also remain determined and argue our points of view with one another and not fight and resort to attacks so quickly. You can accomplish so much if you listen, respect, and then as an elected official, just take the hits and exhibit courage, which I feel that we do in my office. We're mission-driven. We stay on that mission, and we always focus at the end of the day on doing the right thing for the greater good. And I listen to all of my constituents. Not an easy job, but that's okay. I signed up for it, and I'm good with that. Be deliberative in your thinking, but be optimistic and have hope. Hope is what drives human beings to do good things. And so at the end of the day, like I said, I'm an optimist. I look on the bright side, but I'm also a realist. Yeah. And I think you have to have that balance as an elected official. Sure. I'm in this to move our city forward, our district forward, to have real solutions on the issues of the day: homelessness, the lack of affordable housing, the environment, climate change, etc. And then just that neighborhood block-by-block focus on where people live and work.
Well, Councilmember, thank you for that, and those are great words for us all to take in, because next year is a very important year for our region, and we hope your words and the words of our previous guests will all be taken into consideration as we move into this election year in Los Angeles in 2022. So thank you for this dialogue, and thank you for your service to community. We look forward to following the progress that you make and that your team makes. We are grateful for your voice as well here in the heart of Hollywood, in your leadership in terms of reimagining LA's Main Street Hollywood Boulevard. This is a signature project for Hollywood, but also for our region. And again, thank you for being here to celebrate episode 50 of CivitasLA. And keeping with the spirit of the season and celebrating our 50th episode, I'm also excited to share that our new musical selection introduced with this episode is from a local artist, David Leach project, entitled "Without Music, I Feel Alone." So you can check David out on YouTube, and you'll see a great video that takes you on a musical journey to the great and diverse music venues throughout Los Angeles. So to David Leach, thank you for giving us our music. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we hope you have a wonderful and joyful and safe holiday season. We'll be back on January 5th, 2022 to continue our work elevating and celebrating diverse and emerging leaders across this dynamic region. Until we meet again, stay strong, and don't forget to get involved. To learn more about CivitasLA and to share feedback on this program or recommend a future program, please visit us at www.civitasla.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at CivitasLA, on Instagram at Civitas_LA, and on Twitter at Civitas_LA.